On behalf of World Mizrachi and Kosher Travelers, it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome you to this mini-series of virtual Jewish heritage tours to Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, India and Italy. But first, a brief look at my personal journey. I'm a first-generation South African. My late mother was born in Lithuania, my late father was born in Latvia, and my late grandmother, who I refer to as Boba Bela, regaled me with stories of her youth in Lithuania, still in the times when it was behind the Iron Curtain. And that fired my imagination about my personal history and where we came from. But this all came to life in 1996, when the Jewish Agency invited me and a group of other people to participate in the Future Leaders Forum, where we were taken to various countries in Eastern Europe to see the work of the Jewish Agency in repatriating Jews to the Holy Land, to the State of Israel. So what were black and white photographs in my childhood all of a sudden had depth, perspective and colour. In 1996 I went to Poland. In 1997 I went with the Jewish Agency to Lithuania. And thereafter, for 15 years, I travelled with World Mizrachi from Argentina in the west to China and Japan in the east, to India, to Western Europe, to Eastern Europe, and explored the rich Jewish culture and history which is contained in those countries. Approximately 5 years ago, Dabba Walas, who together with his wife Channa run Kosher Travelers, phoned the Chief Rabbi of South Africa, Rabbi Dr. Warren Goldstein, and asked him that since he had just written a book with Rabbi Beryl Wine about the Jews of Lithuania, if he would be able to join them as their scholar-in-residence on tours of Lithuania. The Chief Rabbi politely declined and said that he had too much on his plate to deal with, but they should speak to Hugh Raichlin, who is a practicing attorney but has spent many years researching Lithuania and many other countries and has travelled there and seen the places themselves. They called me, and since then we have had an incredible relationship where I've been their scholar-in-residence for trips to Lithuania, Belarus, Morocco, India and many other countries across Europe. I firmly believe that in order to fully understand ourselves, we have to understand where we come from. I believe that every Jew taps into a stream of consciousness that goes back from the time of Abraham until today, where we are part of everything that our people have experienced. I see the hand of God Almighty, that through this window of history, we can see how we've been guided, how we have survived against all odds. And not only that we've survived, but we have thrived and we have made an inordinate contribution to the world. So I therefore invite you, on behalf of World Mizrachi and Kosher Travelers, to have a taste on this virtual travel, but that one day I hope that you will meet me in person and that I will meet you. And together we will get on the bus, get on the train, get on the plane, and go and visit these magnificent communities all over the world and see and appreciate the magic and the majesty of Jewish history. Namaste. My name is Hugh Raichlin, and we are going to discuss beautiful India, and in particular the wonderful Jewish heritage of India. I was amazed when I went into it how extensive the history is of the Jewish people in India, going back some 2,000 years. I've been privileged to go several times to India with World Mizrachi and later as the scholar-in-residence for Kosher Travelers. And I want to share with you today some of those experiences and give you an overview of the beautiful country that India is, and particularly the fascinating Jewish history that makes up what India is today. One of the beautiful things we saw when we got to the airport was the sign saying Namaskar. And normally the Indian people, the Hindu people in particular, greet other people by saying namaste, a slight bow and holding their hands together. And it was explained to us that that is a wonderful Hindu idea, that we greet the soul, the spirit of the divine in those that are around us. And for me, that is such a fundamental concept in India, where I saw a reverence for life, a tolerance. And we're going to talk about the incredible tolerance of the Indian people towards the Jews, and the way the Hindu culture in particular embraces life. And that's why I'm so excited to share with you the insights and the experiences that I had in India. As we arrived at the airport in Mumbai, you get flooded with the sights and beautiful smells and sounds of a bustling metropolis. We went to the famous gateway of India, which is one of the landmarks of Mumbai, which is just on the coast. And as we know, unfortunately, that's where the Muslim Pakistani terrorists landed and carried out terrible atrocities against the Jewish people and the people of India. But that we will discuss later. And this is a different angle of the famous gateway to India. And then we went into the city, where you see a lot of beautiful British architecture and those trademark black and yellow Fiat motor vehicles. Those are the taxis that go around the city. Everything is possible. What we found about India was, first of all, the politeness, the incredible service, the humility of the people that were there, and also the tremendous efficiency. That although in certain respects it might look primitive, it is far from it. These are an industrious people, and that's why it's become a financial superpower. Everything is possible. Everything works. People are industrious. And here's another example of the wonderful architecture as you go through the city. That was the railway station we saw now. Then we have another government building opposite. This beautiful opulence, and that's of course one of the other recurring things that you see in India, is the opulence and the poverty. And of course, India is famous for its cricket, and you have these wonderful cricket ovals across the city in Mumbai, where people come out at tea time or at lunchtime and have a knock on the wonderful cricket oval. Yes, I mentioned earlier about the terrible terrorist attack that happened between the 26th and the 29th of November 2008, the Taj Hotel that was attacked, and this is what it looked like during the attack when it was set on fire. But yet you see the resilience of the Indian people that rebuilt, repaired, and go on. And then you see that there is a vast array of different religions. There are the Jains, there are the Sikhs. This man happens to be a Sikh Indian. And what I loved about it is that you just see a wonderful array of different cultures living side by side. Of course, the predominant culture is Hindu. You've got a large Muslim population. You have approximately 1.3 billion Indian people, of which there is a minority of about 170 million Muslim people. And then you have the Sikhs and the Jains and many others. And the Jews were only a tiny, tiny fraction of the people of India. But yet we will see the impact that they made and how they lived a beautiful, meaningful life in India, and still are there to this day. And as we know, there was an attack at Nariman House, the Chabad House in Mumbai, where 6 people were murdered, and there were 173 people that died in Mumbai and 308 that were wounded. And of course, the Jewish people lost an incredibly special couple, Rabbi Gabriel and Rivka Holzberg, Zichronam Tzadik Livrocha, a wonderful couple that gave their lives to Jewish tourists and lived in peace and harmony with the people that were around them in Mumbai. And thank God they have a surviving son, Moshe, who went to Israel with Sandra, his nanny, who carried him out of the Chabad house, saved his life, and is with him in the state of Israel. This is the Chabad house as it is today. There's a new Chabad rabbi. It has been greatly improved. It's been renovated. It's been built, but they've kept as part of it the museum of those parts that was affected in the terrorist attack that we should never forget. And this is part of the new building that we see That is the parochet covering the ark in Chabad House. I was so privileged to meet Rabbi and Rebbetzin Holzberg, the parents of the late Gabriel Holzberg. They came to Johannesburg and wanted to meet with me because they had heard that I had been to Mumbai and that I speak about the Jews of India, and in particular talk about the wonderful contribution that their son and daughter-in-law had made for Jews visiting India. This is the Magen David Synagogue that was built by the Iraqi Jews. And this really leads us on to the fact that we have three different groupings of Jews in India. We have the Banisrael Jews that came to the country approximately 2,000 years ago, and we will look at them in a little more detail later. The legend goes that they were shipwrecked. They were on a ship in the times of King Solomon when he sent a group of Jews to India to find ivory and peacock feathers and monkeys to bring them back to the temple in Israel. They got shipwrecked and kept their Judaism for 2,000 years and were recognized by the Beth Din in Israel as being Jewish. And then you also had a second group, the Baghdadi Jews, of which the Sassoon family are the most famous, and this was David Sassoon that built this particular synagogue. And then the Cochini Jews that come from Cochin, which is in the south of India, which we will look at later. So in the main, those are the three main groups of Jews that have lived in the country for all the centuries. This is the inside of the Magen David Synagogue in Mumbai. The Aron Kodesh, and the bima in the middle, a side view, and here I am giving a lecture to the group about the Baghdadi Jews, the tremendous contribution that these philanthropists made to Mumbai and to other parts of India. They built libraries, they built schools, they made a contribution, and that's something also so important, that wherever Jews are in the world, they seem to make a disproportionate contribution to the local community. It's not only about themselves and building synagogues, but it's also uplifting all of the people around them as well. Right next door to the David Sassoon Synagogue is the Sir Jacob Sassoon High School. And as I was saying to you earlier, the Sassoons were amazing. So Sir Jacob, who was related to David Sassoon, built the high school next door, and that was for Jewish children. Today what's amazing is that the majority of the kids that are studying at that particular school, learning Hebrew and learning about all the Jewish holidays, are Muslim Indian kids. And you can see over here that it's in the area called Baikula in Mumbai. I wandered around the school, and you see here a mezuzah on the door, and you can see the Indian children inside, and on the far side are pictures of Chanukah, Purim, Pesach, all the Jewish holy days. Another view of the classroom. There you are, Festival of Sukkot, and right next door, Mother Teresa. So that's bringing together Christianity, Judaism and Islam all in one classroom. I love that, because that's such a beautiful thing, that all the religions of the world should live side by side, and we should be educated about each other, because I believe that hatred and bigotry comes from ignorance, not from knowledge. And here we have a Muslim trader in the market, and as you can see, with his typical garb, with the beard and with the head covering, and he represents that Muslim minority in India. And we went to a Hindu temple, and you can see the elaborate architecture of the temple. And as I always do, I take photographs of the local people, the beautiful colors, and it's just so wonderful that people walk around the city and bring all the beautiful colors that they dress with, and the spices of the city, and the green grass and the trees. And you often find monkeys in villages, and cows and pigs and animals walking around the place. It's just beautiful. It's just living in a place where there's just such beauty, color, diversity. It's really a pleasure. Here's another beautiful lady over here with that typical Hindu symbol between her eyes, with a colorful scarf and a lovely smile, and look at the joy in her eyes. And I always look at the eyes of people, because there's this idea of that fatalism, that God put me in this particular situation, that people are happy with their lot. As we say in Hebrew, hasameach bechelko, somebody that is rich is somebody that is happy with their lot. And you see that there are people that are joyous with so little, but it's an attitude to life ultimately. And these people as well, wherever you walk around the city, so beautiful, so elegant with all these lovely colors. This was a groom on the way to his wedding, riding a white stallion. And the Indians love flowers. It's ornate, it's beautiful. And the generosity was amazing. The father of the groom actually invited our entire group to come into the wedding, even though we weren't dressed properly. He said, please come and eat and drink with us. It'll be our pleasure. A Hindu priest sitting outside one of the temples, and a lot of these people leave their families at a certain point in life, later in life, and they live on the streets, they support themselves, and they break away with family and with physical things to get into a more enlightened state. And you'll see them across India. As we were walking near our hotel, I saw a slum area not far by, not far from the hotel, but what was amazing was how clean everybody was, the personal hygiene. People swept the street around them, they cleaned the carpets, and they were able to sit on the street, on a carpet, playing cards. And I just thought that that is just so refreshing, because it's a cultural thing, it's a matter of self-respect. I might be poor, I might be living in a shack, but it doesn't mean I can't keep myself clean, and I can't create an environment around me which is beautiful and a pleasure to live in. This was an amazing thing. We saw a Dobie Gate in operation with Dabba Walas. This is a massive outdoor laundry area where tens of thousands of garments are washed every day, and many of them look exactly the same. They might have 10,000 white shirts. People of the city bring their washing there, they wrap them up in bundles, they wash them in those troughs, they stand on them with their feet with soapy water, and no items of clothing ever go missing. They wash for the hotels, they wash for the people, and that's what I'm talking about. Ostensibly primitive, but very developed technologically, and the efficiency levels are quite phenomenal. And here you are, you see the washing drying up across the Dobie Gate with some of the buildings of the city in the back. And then you have the Dabba Walas, which is also quite a phenomenal thing. All of those containers on that trolley are tiffins. So this is a system, because there are probably 1 million people commuting into the city every day. People can't carry their lunch packs with them because there's no space on the train, and there's so much traffic when you're walking around. So what these people do, these Dabba Walas, the chap with the white hat and the white uniform, go to the person's home, fetch from his wife a nice hot lunch, and it's stacked up in different metal tins where you'll have rice and cooked vegetables and various other things that are packed up in this tiffin, sealed, put in a bag which keeps in the heat, and then the Dabba Wala will carry it. Either he'll put it on a bicycle or some other mode of transport, in a taxi or whatever, get to a train station. They put them on these massive trays on the train, which they must put on top somewhere on the train where they can hook it on, get off, and they get all their meals delivered to every customer by lunchtime each day. It's something quite amazing, and on our trips we wait outside the train station to see these guys coming out. And that's a photograph of me surrounded by these most wonderful Dabba Walas delivering their lunch tins to people in Mumbai. Now we come to the Banisrael Jews, and this is the synagogue Shar HaShamayim that we visited when we were in the city of Mumbai. When we were there, the synagogue itself was undergoing repairs, and it's called the Shar HaShamayim Synagogue, which is the Gates of Heaven Synagogue in Thane, which is one of the suburbs. And outside the synagogue we saw this stone is a monument in honor of Samson David Medekar, and you'll find that most, if not all, of the Banisrael Jews that live in India, their surnames end with K-A-R. And the foundation of the synagogue was laid on the 26th of March 1878. Look at that, well over 150 years ago. and it was completed on the 29th of December 1879. And this is a picture of the Renovated Synagogue, which was after we had left. We were there during the renovations, but I managed to get a visual of the synagogue as it is today. So beautiful. And opposite the synagogue, they have an apartment building so that visitors that are coming to Tane, people that are going to come to the synagogue, will have a place to stay for Shabbat and for Yom Tov. That wonderful idea that we go back to Abraham, our forefather, with, who had doors on each side of his tent to welcome guests into his home. Such a true Jewish value being exemplified by the Bnei Israel in Tani in Mumbai. And this is the interior of the synagogue with beautiful Persian rugs. That's the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark in the background, the Bima in the foreground. The Gabbai of the shul, the people that run the synagogue, he spoke to us. The rabbi of the synagogue spoke to us. And these are some of the congregants. And as I told you, they've mixed into the community. They are proud Jews. They've got an ancient tradition, but they look and sound like the local population. So if they took off their kippot, their yarmulkes, you wouldn't tell them apart from their non-Jewish brethren that they live amongst. And they use the Marathi language, and all of these signs over here are Marathi. And just like any synagogue all over the world, look how Jewish this is. Donate generously towards the Building and Development Fund, Cemetery Development Program, etc. Jews are always fundraising for one cause or another to build, to advance, and to develop their community. And some of the people in our group, Soli Sachs of World Mizrachi at the back, surrounded by congregants of the synagogue, and a functioning mikveh in the synagogue. So you see that these people are keeping Jewish rituals, and here is a ritual bath that's used by the men and women of the community. This is my wife pointing out another Banisrael synagogue in Mumbai, the Feret Israel Synagogue, and this is it from the outside. The interior, you'll see a lot of lamps. When we went to Morocco, we also saw in Fez and in many other places the Sephardi tradition of hanging lanterns from the roof. I guess that's from times gone by when there wasn't electricity. It was to provide lighting. But this is a typical interior. You can see a very similar feel to the Shara Shamayim synagogue that we saw in Tane. The Siddur of the synagogue, and you'll see Divakar edition once again, K-A-R being the suffix to the name, a giveaway that it's Bnei Israel. The Aron Kodesh, and all the men that are called up to the Torah are given a Mishabeirach, and this is the book which you'll find in every synagogue across the world, where a list is kept of all of those that are given honors to make sure that everybody gets an equal opportunity to come onto the Bima, to have a Mishabeirach, to be given a blessing for themselves and their family. The inside of a typical Siddur, the Siddur Kol Bnei Yisrael, the voice of Bnei Yisrael. And it's the laws, and also contains the laws and customs of the Bnei Israel Jews. We then met a fascinating man by the name of Jacob Stockman, who started something called the Gabriel Project Mumbai. He's an ex-Australian, a friend of David Walas of Kosher Travelers, who, as I said, I travel with. And Jacob Stockman is a businessman, and he went to India and he saw the terrible suffering of the Indian people, and he said, something has to be done. So this man, of his own accord, a one-man band, has gone around the world raising money and has brought education and free medical to one of the most terrible slums just outside Mumbai. And he now has Bnei Israel Jews working for him and others, and it's just phenomenal. You know, one person can change the world. We remember Sugihara, the Japanese consul in Lithuania, for example, that took an action that saved 6,000 people, and today there are 40,000 people in the world because of him. Jacob Stockman came to India like many other businessmen. He said, I'm going to be making a difference. And he's devoted his life to improving the lot of the poorest of the poor in an Indian slum. And these are some of the Bnei Israel Jewish guys that work with him. There's a photograph with me and them in Mumbai after we had been to the Kalva slum to see what they do. And this is, we went into the slum. And here's the Joshua Jacob Greenberger Learning Center in Kalva and the Shravan Health Center. This is all because one man has gone out to the world to raise money to give health care and education to the poorest of the poor in the slum in India. And you see over here the Gabriel Project Mumbai. It's named after Gabriel Holtzberg. Remember we mentioned him earlier, the rabbi that was murdered in Mumbai by the Pakistani terrorists. And here, this is Jews bringing light to the world. Out of the darkness of the terrorist attack, you've got the light of education and of medical care in the name of Rav Gabriel Holtzberg, Zichrona Tzadik Livrocha, coming through and helping and making a difference to the lives of these people in India through another Jew. The happy, wonderful children sitting on the floor, well-dressed, clean, being educated. They've brought in computers and screens for the children to learn from. And imagine, this is a place surrounded by shacks. These are the lovely children with books sitting on the floor, happy. They sang for us, being educated. These are the little tuk-tuks, those little taxis that took us right deep into the slum to see the people. Photographs of the slum as we went around. And then the masala mamas, these are Indian women that create cookery books that tourists can buy of Indian cooking, and all the money from those cookery books gets put back into the clinic and creates employment for people in the slum. Here are the masala mamas, my wife on the left, and our friend Madeleine Greenberg from Toronto next to her, surrounded by the masala mamas. And these are some of the wonderful cookery books that were bought to help the people in the slum. They supply clean water to the people in the slum, and they've got to pay, even if it's 1 or 2 rupees, but if you give it for free, it'll be wasted. If they pay for it, no matter, even if it's a small amount of money, they'll respect the fact and they'll look after it. And here's a woman and child, just I thought a beautiful photograph. Once again, that personal hygiene, the way that people still respect themselves, even though they're living in a slum. 2 lovely kids couldn't resist taking a photograph of the happiness, the joy on their faces. Slum kids, but you wouldn't imagine it from that photograph. We had a wonderful Shabbat in a place called Pushkar, which is towards the north of the city, and here you can see, welcome to the holy city of Pushkar. Please help us protect the environment, say no to plastic bags. And they also ask people to please dress with respect in a modest way, and also not to drink alcohol in the village. This is a man-made lake in the center of the town. As you can see, people go down there to bathe and to say their prayers. This is when I was there in 2009. I've been there twice subsequently. And you'll see a lot of Hebrew signage around the place. This is Beit Chabad, Habayit Shelcha Pushkar, your home in Pushkar, Baghdadi Guest House. Look at this here, the Bird's Eye Restaurant, pizzeria with the Israeli flag. And 2 of the boys, I think that these are sons of the Chabad rabbi in Pushkar, Rabbi Goldstein, and they're wearing their kippot as they're putting up signs around the town to advise the Jewish tourists of activities in Chabad House. I found that this was very, very wonderful. Dr. Gupta, a real entrepreneur. Look at the services that he provides. This is in Pushkar, right near the synagogue. Pushkar Raj Hospital. So first of all, it's a hospital, private primary health care, medical consultation, hospital treatment, pharmacy, laboratory, and ambulance, all in one little place over here. And that's what I was talking about, how creative and industrious these Indian people are. And then we leave the north of India and we move down to the south of India to Cochin. We arrived at Cochin International Airport, and this is very lush, completely different geography. And here you see a wonderful waterfall, and right to the top of the mountains, and then all of a sudden you're in a different India where you see these beautiful mountains and the beautiful tea plantations around you, and you just feel that you've been transported into a different world. And this was a very attractive world for many of the Jews that came 2,000 years ago to Cochin, which is more in the south of the country, the southwest of the country, where there was commerce and where there was trade. and where people were coming from overseas to get the wonderful Indian tea from Ceylon, from India. And that's what drives the economy. And here we went on a wonderful ride on an elephant and feeding the elephant. And there you see the Indian elephant a lot smaller than the African elephants which we have over here, and how tame they are, and they've been used for work, for transport. And amongst all this beauty and this tropical environment, and I love to put things in context, we come to the Jewish community of Cochin. And we went to the Paravur Synagogue in Mangalam, in North Paravur in Kerala, because the whole province is called Kerala. And this is the synagogue that we found that has been there for some 400 years, and even before that there was a synagogue. And this, as you can see here, is a stone, a foundation stone, talking about the very earliest origins of this Beit Knesset, this synagogue in Iroquois. It was built actually in 1164. The original synagogue was built in 1164 and renovated in 1616. So here you're looking at a synagogue that's 400 years old, but in fact was on the site 900 years ago. Who would have known that you've got Jewish synagogues, that you've had Jews in India, and that their synagogues are still there after almost 1,000 years in the same place, that were looked after and loved by those Banisrael that there are very few of in India, but this was the wonderful heritage that they left behind. And as you can see here in the foreground is the original foundation of the synagogue as it was in the 1100s and renovated in the 1600s behind it. And this is the renovated synagogue, as you see it today, with the Bima in the middle, the Aron Kodesh in the far side, beautiful wooden carvings. And there you see a close-up, and I believe that many of these have got replicas in Beit HaTfutzot in Israel. And this is the entrance from the front half of the synagogue to the back half of the synagogue. And you can imagine there was once a yeshiva up there. There were people that were learning in the top of the building. There was a synagogue in this complex. The ladies section at the top of the synagogue. And then there is a video playing constantly of the Jews of Iroquois when they were praying in this synagogue not too many years ago. And these are all visuals that were taken of the community as it was before they left for the land of Israel. And this is a house that was owned by a Jewish family before they emigrated from this particular village in India. And this gentleman came out and was pointing out the Jewish houses where his Jewish neighbors used to live, and pointed out where the synagogue was, where we were. So it's still very fresh in the memory of those that are there. We then went to see another synagogue in another village close by, and that's the Chena Mangalam Synagogue. It was established in the year 1420, and it was rebuilt in 1614. You can see a long and ancient history, and it's now a heritage site because the Indians are so proud of the wonderful contribution that the Jews made to their country. And this is the inside of the Mangalam Synagogue. Look at the lovely ceiling, the lanterns that hang from the roof, the lovely woodwork, beautiful carving of the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark. It is a truism that all the religions that reached the shore of Kerala were welcomed onto the land with open arms, and this is truly a tribute to the Hindu people, to the Indian people. In fact, Kerala society has looked upon religious diversity as a wealth and never as a problem. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, where in the world do you hear about religious diversity being seen as a wealth and never as a problem? Today in the world there's such hatred and bigotry because of the other, in inverted commas. People fear people that are different from themselves. And here the Indians are saying to the world, embrace diversity. People bring different skills and outlooks and culture to what we have and enrich the environment in which we are. The oral legend of the king who requested the Jews to stay put should be seen in this light. There was a king originally that welcomed the Jews to the Kerala province. And the king remarked, "My kingdom has different communities except yours, so please stay. I'm asking you to stay because you're different." What a message the world in the 21st century could hear. Right next to the synagogue, we looked around and we saw Eliyahu family, Bat Zion and Bezalel. I said, we've got to go in. And this is David and Dabba Walas of Kosher Travelers, starting and leading the group up the driveway to meet Bezalel Eliyahu. And he said his family have lived in that home, on that ground. They might have renovated the home over the years for 400 years. And he lives in India for 4 months a year, and 8 months a year he goes to Israel. This is his wife, Bat Zion Eliyahu, proud Jews, proud Zionists, proud Indians that split their time between India and Israel. And here he is, Bezalel Eliyahu, when he was a young man with David Ben Gurion, and it mentions the Chena Mangalam Synagogue, and he was given an award of being one of the most outstanding Jews from the diaspora to come to Israel and make such a contribution to the agriculture of the state of Israel. An Indian Jew that made a wonderful contribution to the state of Israel. And as we wandered through the streets of Kerala, these are the street scenes that we saw in Cochin, and we walked around some of the business area, and as you can see at the bottom left of that sign says Jew Street, Ernakulam. So this is now the town of Ernakulam, and this is Jew Street, still kept as Jew Street today. In Poland, for example, you have Jerusalemska Street. So here you see in this place there's still Jew Street in Ernakulam. And here's Michelle in a spice shop. Of course, that's why the Western world went to India for the spices. That was the spice route. We saw this Kadavangolam Synagogue, which is a synagogue behind a pet shop and a nursery. The Jewish man that owns the nursery and the pet shop is looking after the ancient synagogue behind. So this is the gentleman on the left that came to the gate to open when he heard that we were there. And we walked along that path to find a beautiful preserved synagogue at the back of the nursery. And he has a pet shop in the sort of the vestibule as you start to enter towards the synagogue. Here you are, here's the pet shop, here are those tropical fish. And behind it is this hidden synagogue. And this man, his children live in Israel. He told us that he's got a daughter that studied at the Technion in Israel, but he said that he made a promise to his mother that he would see that for as long as he lived, the synagogue would be kept in good condition. And look at the beautiful condition that he keeps the synagogue in to this day. And the Aron Kodesh, views of the interior of the synagogue, with the bima on the right, chandelier coming down on the right, copper, and even a lulav and etrog from Sukkot, the festival of Sukkot. We were there some months afterwards, but he kept it. I don't think that there are too many lulavim and etrogim in India, and he has kept it for months afterwards. And here he is, Elias Joseph Babu, they call him Babu, and his family, he said, have been in this particular village for 400 years, and he is the last Jew of Kadavangolam. And he's got a daughter, Avital, who's married in Israel. As I said to you, she studied at the Technion, and he goes to Israel every second year to be with his daughter. And he told me that his grandmother taught him Hebrew and the Cochini traditional melodies.
Ayin ve ayin tire shehina veshab banali bule manau ale arim ragle me basar shalom me binyai. This is the first stanza. There are five more stanzas there, and this is we sing all the auspicious occasions. And for us in Simatora Minha prayer. Before Minha, both the sides exchange songs. Because before the Akafa of the Minha, Adi Rata Besion, Kulate Hayon, like that. Awu Binigla, Allah Sinai, Baruch Nigla, Allah Sinai, Sinai, Haye Moshe. Then Baruch nigla al Sinai, nigla al Sinai, 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 Gaye Moshe. Like that.
And this is the Ezrat Nashim, the ladies section on top. The beautiful ceiling, the lanterns. And here is a photograph with me and Babu, a wonderful, warm human being. May he live a long and happy life. And what's quite amazing is that the late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in 1968 came to the 400th anniversary of the Baghdazi Synagogue in Cochin to pay tribute to the inordinate contribution that the Jews had made to the state of India. And I think that's amazing. When you're talking about 1 billion citizens, and you're talking about maybe 40,000 at its most Banisrael Jews, 7,000 Baghdadi Jews, and a small community of Cochini Jews of maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people at its zenith. All that 60,000, 70,000 Jews in a country, and a woman comes to pay tribute to their contribution out of 1 billion citizens. It just shows you that they were recognized. They made their mark. And that's what makes me so proud to be a Jew. That we're part of a culture that wants to give to the world, wants to improve the world. We have philanthropists that build not only for the Jewish people, but for the world around us. That is the wonderful contribution that we have made wherever we've been. And this is the Paradesi Shul that I told you Indira Gandhi came to visit. We had a wonderful Shabbat there. We were actually short of a minyan. There were only 8 men in our group. And thank God, suddenly another 4 Israeli tourists came in and we had a service. And it was absolutely wonderful. We invited the 4 guys back to our hotel. They hadn't planned on having a Friday night dinner. And they were singing. And Divrei Torah, we shared ideas of Torah and Judaism. And they said that they were so inspired. And here you are, Jews coming from different parts of the world, meeting, making a quorum, making a minyan, and then inviting them over to dinner in the hotel and having a very special time together. On the floors of the synagogue are tiles that they brought in from China. In fact, that Raj that welcomed the Jews to Cochin, he imported these tiles from China, and they were donated to the synagogue, and each one is unique. The beautiful lanterns that hang from the ceiling, as we've seen in some of the other synagogues. And this is a photograph in the synagogue which talks about the time when there was trade between King Solomon's kingdom and the Indians on the Malabar coast. And this is something that is remembered in this particular painting in the synagogue. And there is a Muslim man that today looks after the synagogue. The Paradesi Synagogue is looked after a Muslim man that is meticulous about people taking their shoes off, that they shouldn't damage the floor, that they should walk around respectfully, that women should dress appropriately. Quite an amazing thing and so inspiring. It's just a view of the outside of the Paradesi Synagogue, just to give you an idea of the size of it, the external wall. And this is a stamp commemorating Indira Gandhi's visit to the synagogue in 1968. And we met the late Sarah Cohen, the last Jewess of Cochin. What a privilege. She was well into her 90s, and she used to make beautiful hand-embroidered covers for people to put over their bread on a Friday night on Shabbat. Unfortunately, she had a bit of dementia when we saw her, but she was the last Jewess of Cochin. She was born there, she married there, and she was a very strong personality and would never leave. So it was so wonderful to walk into her home with a mezuzah on the door, Magen David's on the burglar bars outside, and she lived on Jew Street, which was the street that went up to the Paradesi Synagogue. And this is the late Sarah Cohen of blessed memory. What a wonderful, wonderful woman. Here she is with her husband in the early years, a photograph that I took in her home. And then we stayed at a beautiful hotel in Kamarakum in Kerala. And this is something that's important, that when we take tours overseas, we see as much as we can and we see the diversity. But thank God, when we end the day, we're able to come to a place where we can relax in a beautiful atmosphere, rejuvenate and get all the energy back that we need for the next day. And if you come back early enough in the afternoon, a lovely swim to wash off all the travel rigors of the day, to refresh and recharge your battery. I do not think there is any record in the whole history of the human race which compares with that of the Jewish people. Yet through it all you have kept the faith, you have kept up your self-respect, you have kept up your national ideals, and you are surviving today among the nations of the world. You have not been absorbed, you have not been merged, and have not lost your identity. But through all the tribulations and persecutions, through all the vicissitudes of human history, you have survived. You have survived, and the day will come when the words of the prophets will become true, and Israel will return to its own land. Who do you think said those profound words? Jan Smuts, the former Prime Minister of South Africa, in a speech made on the 3rd of November 1919. How amazing. After all the vicissitudes, after all the places we've been, all over the world, in deepest India, yet the Jews have survived. They're returning to their country, rebuilding Israel, and at the same time bringing with them that rich heritage of wherever they have been in the world, and continue to make a contribution not only in the countries in which they are, but to Israel as well, and to the entire world. Hodu ladunai ki tov ki lolam chasto. Hodu means India, but it also means praise to God, for He is good, and may His goodness remain forever. Namaste. Thank you.
When Eddie was a child, he dreamed of places far beyond his own backyard, inspiring him to become a pioneer in kosher tourism worldwide. Today, Kosher Travelers has expanded remarkably, yet continues to embrace his legacy, offering their clients exceptional quality and personalized service in unique destinations around the globe. So, start dreaming and create your most memorable vacations. Journey along roads steeped in history and Jewish heritage. Immerse yourself in cultural experiences, explore nature's great wonders, or simply relax and take time out for yourself. Kosher Travelers allows you to discover the world without compromise, offering an array of destinations and travel styles to suit, from exotic tours to Passover and Sukkot programs, summer luxury hotels, African safaris, to deluxe cruises, or alpine ski getaways. Your dream kosher adventure awaits. So stop waiting for the perfect time to travel. This is your perfect time. Plan your dream vacation today at koshertravelers.com.